Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Diaries of Space Explorers, where we dive in to learn more about space exploration and how it has benefited everyone on Earth. I am your host, Galantel Ameti, and in this episode, we follow the journey of Hira Nadeem, who graduated with a Bachelors of Engineering from McMaster University in Ontario, Canada. She is actively involved in space exploration, where she was once the former operations and co-project manager for the McMaster NEUDOSE CubeSat satellite mission, and has a strong passion for Earth observation and monitoring satellites that are orbiting our planet. Without further ado, let's dive right into the episode. Thank you for coming on. I know with everything happening right now, finding the time to do even more virtual stuff with Zoom fatigue going around is quite challenging. So I wonder if you could maybe quickly introduce yourself here.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Hira Nadeem. I recently graduated from McMaster University with my Bachelor of Electrical Engineering. And now I'm starting my Masters of Engineering Science at Western in the Institute for Earth and Space Exploration. I've done a bit of space stuff throughout my undergraduate degree, some outreach with the Planetary Society. I was the former president of the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, Canada. And I also participated in the CubeSat satellite team at my school, McMaster NEUDOSE, which is taking part in the Canadian CubeSat Project with the CSA. And then most recently, I was selected as a Brooke Owens Fellow, which is a fellowship for underrepresented, or for women and gender minorities in the aerospace sector internationally. So it was really, really cool to be a part of that because they predominantly choose people in the United States. So to be a Canadian, a part of that was really cool. And through that opportunity, I got an internship at Planet in San Francisco, California. And despite COVID, they were able to get me out there to work in their lab and touch satellites and do some cool space things with that. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it sounds like you have very fascinating and two quite a long listed background involvement in space. And for someone who's part of the Institute for Space Exploration, just want to formally welcome you to our team at Western. So we're very happy to have you on board. I think you're going to be an excellent addition to our institute.
Thank you.
So with this podcast, I've been hypothetically filling out the diaries of space explorers, trying to figure out their journey and what brought them to space, and try to talk about why space exploration is actually beneficial for everyone back on Earth. Because I'm guessing we both hear these questions. People ask, why do we invest all this money in space? How is this actually going to help me in my everyday life? So I guess I want to start back from the beginning. So what is it that brought you towards space? What is it that drew you into this type of career?
Yeah, I feel like the common answer a lot of people say is they saw astronauts. They were like, wow, I want to be an astronaut. And when I would watch launches as a child, I would be really in awe of this massive metal thing is lifting and leaving the world. And I wasn't more so concerned about kind of the people floating, because that was really scary to me. I was really afraid of roller coasters. And I just knew that just made my stomach churn and feel like butterflies. But I was really interested in the people on the ground who were, hunched over the desk and really anticipating hearing back from the people on that metal thing that has left the world. And I was really excited when I saw them kind of breathe a sigh of relief and throw up their hats and hands and mic sets and everything. And I was just like, wow, that is so cool. This whole group of people did that thing, that amazing thing. So I was really excited to see that it wasn't just the two astronauts we see on the moon, or three astronauts who went there. It's this whole group of people around the world globally working together to achieve something so great. And it crossed barriers. It was there were people in China and South America and in Europe and in Canada and the United States, all hunched over looking looking at these achievements that we as a humanity were doing. So as a young kid, I was like, that is so cool, and like I want to be a part of that. And I was really interested in math and science growing up, and I had a lot of great teachers in my elementary school that encouraged me to kind of pursue those things. And you know, I was in a science fair early on, even though my little project didn't work, because my science teacher was like, she's really excited about it, I really want her to go to the science fair. And as a seventh grader, I was exposed to a whole community in my city, and then I was really excited by just being a part of that community, even though it was small. And I wanted to feel more of that community. And so I sought that out into my high school. And it just kept going from there. And, you know, I wanted to either go into astrophysics because it was like the direct line to, you know, this exploration of these celestial bodies, and stars, and like just dark matter, like all these like black holes and all these cool things. But I felt that I really wanted to touch things and like play with them and like make them work. And so I went into engineering, and there were some interesting things with getting to engineering. A lot of stress, a lot of, you know, am I gonna make it? You know, the average cutoffs were really high, and I remember crying to my high school teacher to just bump my grade like 0.5% just so I could get into McMaster's engineering program. And she was grateful. So like I was really grateful that she, you know, did that for me. And I ended up getting into McMaster engineering. And then we had a general first year. And again, average cutoffs were, you know, in the way of me achieving what I wanted to do in the next year, which was I wanted to go into mechatronics engineering, which is robotics. So I wanted to, you know, do things like the Canadarm and like manipulate Dexter and things like that. And I was like, oh, I should go into robotics. But again, averages were not my best friend. I was not the best in terms of getting high grades on tests. So I ended up in electrical engineering, which was like my fourth choice. But I still, you know, I was really upset about it, but I still kind of tried to see if there were ways that I could do things with space as an electrical engineer. And my mindset was like, if you're not in, if you're not in aerospace as engineering, then like there's no space stuff. Like it's like electrical engineers or whatever. But I kind of like, based on my want for community, kind of like in my university, went out there, went to conferences, and at these conferences people kept saying like, we need electrical engineers, like we need people who understand, you know, circuits and like how things work in a space environment. And so that's when I like was like, oh, maybe my degree is actually important. So yeah, that kind of like got me to stick with the electrical engineering and kind of work hard to get a degree. And thankfully 5 years later I achieved my bachelor's.
Yeah, so I mean, finding that, I guess for you to work towards finding that right path in engineering to achieve what you wanted to get involved in space. And I know you mentioned that a lot of people think that if you're not in aerospace engineering, you're not going to be able to be involved in space, because aerospace is directly involved understanding rockets, even building them, and then also monitoring them when they launch. But it's not necessarily the case. Like, you got your degree in electrical engineering and you've been heavily involved in space activities and research. And I'm sure that's going to be the same for other types of engineering, such as mechanical and computer engineering, even chemical engineering. So, but what is it that got engineering? That was definitely the field that you wanted to stick with. The other types of sciences or engineering didn't really make you say, you know what, I want to go down that path. But and I'm guessing, was the support that you probably got in your high school getting into the engineering program McMaster, did that really help you say, this is what I definitely want to do?
Yeah, it's like I was mostly interested in technology. I think like it was always like, so the advice my parents would always give me was like, you know, keep your doors open, always kind of be broad. And, you know, at the time, about like 6-7 years ago when I was applying for university, the space industry was existent, but it wasn't as accessible, at least from what I was seeing. Like I couldn't see as much, like we see so much outreach these days, so much communication between institutes of like, sorry, administrations of universities and high schools have clubs for STEM, and there's a lot of stuff going on, but it wasn't as much like even 7 years ago. There were some things, but not as much. So my parents were like of the mindset that, oh, she wants to do space. Space is cool, but are there jobs? Like, you should look at things that have backups, like good potential backups. So like something like sciences, early on, my parents were like, well, maybe you'll end up doing academia. Like, is that something that you want, is to like, research and like write papers and potentially be a professor, which obviously there is so much more in academia than just like what the outside notion is. But at the time, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, that was what I had. But my parents were like, oh, well, engineering, if you don't get into space, like you could work at, a hydro, a transmission company, or you could work in the electrical engineer, and as an electrical engineer or mechanical engineer or something, you could work on the ground. Like you don't have to work in the space industry. So that was kind of like their influence was like, always keep your doors open. And as parents, they're always wanting the most possible outcome for success for their child. But on like the more, they also were like, oh, whatever you want to do, you can do it. Like, we're not going to stop you. We're going to support you. But on their side, it was like, I really enjoyed technology. And in high school, I had this one computer science kind of computer. It was like computer tech. We had like the tech department, and each freshman would have to take all of the different potential tech options, which was like multimedia, wood shop, manufacturing, things like that. And I really, really liked the computer tech course that I was taking. And I ended up becoming like very close with that teacher. And in the years after that, of that first freshman class, I ended up taking his advanced class in high school. And we built a relationship of like, he knew I was interested in it, but there were things that I took longer to understand. And so I also wanted to take other courses, and maybe this wasn't like what fit in, but he would always encourage me. And like, I would come to his like office and he would give me books that I could read and tell me about courses that I could do. And even when he was teaching his students, he would give me some things that I could read or like projects I could try. And like, I didn't end up doing as many of them, but it was really encouraging to know that, he believed that I had the interest, and I just needed to put the time in and like to feed that interest. So I had teachers like that, not only that tech teacher, but he is one of the more significant ones, who were just kind of like encouraging of me going and pursuing kind of like these like things that are in tech. And being a girl in high school, there weren't many other girls who were interested. Like the robotics club at my school was all men, and even my teacher, his tech course was predominantly male. I think there was like one other girl. And it was really nice to see that like these male teachers were encouraging of other females to get involved and wanted us to do it. So I think like that positive environment that I was in high school around doing tech and like being encouraged to do it, kind of like pushed me to do engineering, even though I had heard a lot of like bad stigma around, it is male dominated, and what if you feel you can't do it?
So you think that positive environment your high school teacher gave to encourage more girls and women to be involved in engineering really helped spark your interest more to say, this engineering, I think, is what I want to do, because it's more it feels welcoming to me.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I do feel like a lot more schools and institutions probably need to adapt to that environment, because I do agree with you that I think it is still a male-dominated field. I know in the years that more women have been getting into engineering, but I don't know the stats, but I know it still sways a lot more to males, which I think we need to get more of a balance. So I hope something like that, this positive environment that your teacher uses, kind of spreads, becomes contagious in a way to other schools and universities.
Yeah, definitely, like especially at such like developmental ages, like even younger than my high school, like elementary school, like having these things early on and encouraging young people, not even just like young women, but the gender minorities, and people of color, like to be involved in STEM and to see that they have a place and there is space for them, and there is, you know, people who are like them too, that are active in this community, and that, you know, even if it feels hard, everyone feels like it's hard at times, and that it doesn't mean that you're not good at it. And I so many people, like when I was younger, who I'd be like, you know, other girls friends that I had, like I'd be like, oh, like why don't you do this, like why don't we do this together? And they were like, I'm bad at math, like I'm not really, I get bad grades in it. Like I was also not getting great grades in it, but I was like interested in it. I was like, isn't that what matters, like the interest? And like, you know, there are other ways to evaluate how well you know something, and there's other ways to learn these things. And my grades did improve over the years because of my interest. So I think like reminding people that it's not just about the number that you get at the end of the day, but about how much you take away from it and how you apply that knowledge.
Yeah, I feel like you did have to. So I'm guessing like when you got into engineering and all these courses, were you able to, or did you have to overcome any obstacles that you feel that were not stopping you from trying to get into the space industry as a potential career?
Mm. So just like general obstacles, like relating to like, I guess, academics, and then also into space.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the obvious academic barrier were the academics themselves. I I find that, as you have heard from my description, is that I do a lot of things. I do a lot of extracurriculars outside of my coursework, and sometimes uh, I find that results in me having to split my time on how long I can study. And so, engineering as a whole teaches people to learn things in a very short, condensed, stress-induced time frame. So, I did have a lot of late nights where I was just like studying. But I had other times where I was like, I had meetings for extracurriculars. So, um, I found that I struggled to like find that right balance in university, because I had started to do these things right away in first year and second year, when it's like a really important, especially in like just like any degree that you do, to like feel like you can adjust to this new environment. Like university is a whole different ballpark than it is like high school or even middle school. Like you got to adjust. So I didn't really take that time and to adjust, and so I found myself struggling to like balance between the things I was doing outside of class, and which resulted um, in second year I had my this linear algebra course, and I ended up failing it. And I knew I failed it before I got the mark, and I was like, oh snap. And it was a second year course, which when you're applying for things like internships, most people apply in second year to get something for the fall, or sorry, for the summer. Or if you're trying to apply for like a longer internship in your third year, they look at your second year grade. So I was like, I'm done. Like I failed this second year course. No one's going to hire me. And like, no one's going to even want to work with me because I failed. So that was a huge, not only like, it felt like a blocker academically and professionally, but also just a mental block, like that I was thinking, like, there's nothing I can do. Like, I failed this course. But at the same time, I got involved with the Cube satellite team at my school, and they didn't know that I failed this course, but they wanted me to work on this team because they saw that I was passionate. And I think working in that community of accepting people who, you know, were older than me, and I could say later on, like, oh man, I failed this course. Like, is it over? They were like, are you kidding me? Like, I've also failed courses. Like, just retake it and do better. You'll be fine. So that community really helped me to, you know, overcome that mental block. But on the other side, just the whole access to the space industry, even being an engineer or a scientist, where it seems like it's obvious that the space industry needs you, there was still some issues with even just kind of knowing where the opportunities were. And I think that was the biggest thing, was like, I didn't even know half the companies even in Ontario existed, even though space is far, like very condensed in Ontario, in Toronto, in that surrounding area. So early on when I was looking at companies for like internships and things like that, like I didn't even know half these things existed. I knew MDA existed because of Canada, but I didn't know there were these startups that were coming up, and companies like Telesat, like that's an obvious one too, that's been around for such a long time. I didn't even know the CSA had internship opportunities until much later. So yeah, it was like this understanding of where the opportunities were, was kind of something difficult for me to know. So from that, I kind of was like, well, if I want to know these things, other people are going to want to know these things. So that's where I started working with the Planetary Society and kind of made a club on campus, which was to get other people who were like me, who wanted to learn more about what opportunities were out there and what people in Canada were doing in space. And we could all just hang out and get to know these things. And through that, we started the space industry night at McMaster. And we were able to research, and this was like, oh, now we have this event that we want to do, let's actually research which industry, like which companies are in industry, and ask them to come out. And so I learned from there, literally that exercise of running this event, like who all these companies were. And so I think that was really important, and is still important, is to like the access, like where, like how are we communicating with these potential people, and like how are we showing them that we exist. And I think like, yeah, the more people know about what's out there, the more they're going to go to it.
I think it's very inspiring that you took that initiative to make these companies that are involved in space and exploration more, I guess, just more available for people to learn about, because I feel like a majority of not just Canadians, but just everyone worldwide, that they don't realize how many companies in their own country actually contribute to space missions. And I feel like it's the hardest part is just finding them, because I think you must have realized they don't really advertise much that they do space until you directly talk to them, and then they start talking about space. So was it kind of challenging trying to find a lot of these companies? You said there was like a lot that you didn't even realize were involved. You mentioned MDA and the CSA, which for everyone listening who isn't aware, that stands for the Canadian Space Agency. Yes, Canada does have a space agency. That's not just NASA and the European Space Agency in the world. So how did you find all these companies?
Conferences. I started in my, like the reason I found out about the Planetary Society as its own was at a conference. So one of my favorite ones to go to is the Queen Space Conference. I believe they've gone virtual, so definitely watch out for them coming soon. The Queen Space Conference was really great because they would send a delegation of students from McMaster to go up to Kingston, and the financial support for students to go to a conference is really necessary. So early on, I couldn't really, I was a second year student. I didn't have really disposable income because I was paying, for other things, school, and just like other things. So they supported students to go to this conference. And there were a bunch of people from the space industry in Canada there who were alumni of Kingston and of Queens. And, we're all coming together to kind of talk to these students who at Queens, which I had no idea about, had like things like a rover team and a CubeSat, and like all these like space streams within their engineering programs and their science programs. So I was like, whoa, this is a whole new world. Like McMaster is like so different. But this conference was like the opening of the floodgates for like, there are other conferences like this isn't the only one. And kind of that networking of like, again, the community aspect of like, I met people there that I was like, whoa, let's be friends. Like you like space, I like space. Like, why aren't we friends already? And, learning from each other, and like talking to people there, they told me more about things that they were involved with and like things that they had heard about, and just listening to the talks and like hearing about really cool research that was going on in like Canadian, people that are working on projects with other government bodies and other countries. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So from there, I learned about the Planetary Society. I also believe I learned about SEDS from there, Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. And so, yeah, I just basically, actually, no, I didn't learn about SEDS from there, but I learned about a lot of things from this conference, and then I continued to go to more. I just kind of like looked online for events, or I like anytime I could. When I started following these people on like LinkedIn and Facebook, like I could see what events they were going to, and I decided to go to those. And I just thought, even though I don't work in any of these projects or don't learn about any of these projects like in school, it'd be cool to like hear about them. And networking is a great thing. The more you hear about other people's experiences, the more you can relate to new people you're meeting. And, oh, I heard about you talk at this conference and now you're here and I can relate to a talk you did. And like, I know your background now. So that's how I kind of started to meet companies and representatives from there. And yeah, so networking was a really big proponent of that.
And from networking and finding all these companies, is that what led you to your interest in satellites and getting to work at the company Planet down in San Francisco?
Yeah, I think like I definitely, yeah, networking really got me there. One, learning about the Cube satellite team at my school and being exposed to like that kind of a project was so important. Just like knowing that, like I used to think about like, so I used to write down my goals. Like I was like, I want to do space. What's a goal of mine? I want to send something I work on to space. And I literally thought that that would be after I graduate, maybe after I get a master's, maybe even a PhD. Like I'll be able to touch something that'll go to space. I'll be able to work on something that I've thought about and send it to space. But I literally turned a corner one day in the student center at McMaster and saw a booth about a satellite team, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that? Like, are you guys just thinking about a satellite?" And they're like, "No, we're actually designing one. Like, we're gonna actually build one." And they had already done a lot of work on it. They had built some custom boards for it. They were designing custom boards, and they were like, "Yeah, we're just trying to get some students involved and like help us out to build it." And they were like, "Are you interested? Like, you should come out to our meeting." So I went, and I was like, "This is crazy." I applied with trying to hide my failed grade, and they seemed to like that I had some interest, even though I didn't have like concrete experience. I had some from my classwork, but they were like, "Oh, she's willing to learn." So joining that team and working on projects with that, and like just understanding that there is so much different about space than there is on Earth, especially from like an electronics level. Like you have a cell phone here, but like if you send a cell phone to space, it's not going to work. Like it might work for a little bit, as we know from things like PhoneSat, but mostly like you can't call in space. Like things are going to blow up or get fried or like just stop working because of things like radiation. And like I had no idea about any of this. I was just like, I knew space was different. I just didn't know how. So learning about how things on Earth react in space and how we can do things to make them survive was like so interesting to me. And I think like that's what ultimately built my interest in the manufacturing aspect, which when I went to the Canadian Space Summit a couple years later, in my third year, I met someone from Sinclair Interplanetary, and he was doing a talk about kind of like the manufacturing they do for reaction wheels. And he was showing like these cool pictures of the lab they have in Toronto and the great view of the CN Tower they have from their office, and these like reaction wheels that they were building and were making in-house. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. So I built up the courage and like went up and talked to him, and he was saying like, oh, we hire interns sometimes, like, just, you gotta just send a resume and like let me know if you're interested in what you're interested in. And he was the one who was like, oh, we need electrical engineers, like we need people who have that background, because we have a lot of people who know mechanical engineering and aerospace, so like it'd be good to have some electrical engineers on board as well. So I was like, great. I sent him my resume, and like a couple months later he got back to me, and I went down to the lab in Toronto. I was on an internship actually working in the transmission industry. I was like I guess I'll just work for this Ontario transition company when I graduate, and then maybe see if space works out. But this was my first line into space by connecting with this guy from Sinclair. His name's Thomas Sears. Great guy. We're at Queen's University doing some really cool research. But yeah, he invited me to the lab, showed me around. We did an interview, and yeah, he was really, willing to give me a shot to learn, even though I had minimal experience in space, just through my Cube satellite team. But that was like probably the best internship experience ever, like working in that team and like learning about space and being able to ask questions and like seeing how these things interact and like what is required for space. That was like the best internship. It was so much fun. And through that, I actually got to go to SmallSat in Utah with them, which was like, I was like, are you guys sure you want to take me? Like, I'm an intern. They're like, of course, like everyone's going to go. Like, you should learn about these things. So from there, I actually heard about Brooke Owens. I saw a girl walking around with this astronaut with wings on her bag, and I was like, wow, that's so cute. I feel like I've seen that logo somewhere. So I asked her about it. I was like, oh yeah, like what is that? And she told me it was a fellowship for women, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. And she's like, it's open to international people. And I was like, oh, that's even cooler because I'm from Canada. So I learned about Brooke Owens there, and I heard a talk from Planet, and I was like, not making connections between Planet being a host company at Brooke Owens. I was like, oh, they're just a cool satellite company at SmallSat, like really cool stuff. They're doing environmental things, climate change, really cool. And lo and behold, I went through the Brooke Owens process, which was one of the most rewarding and anxiety-inducing experiences of my life, because there were like 500 applicants. This year there were 800. Like everyone who was working on this fellowship is like amazing. But my year was like 500. So I was like, there's absolutely no chance. But I ended up getting the host company interview and was matched with only Planet because they take international students, because they do some extra work to not have to worry about some of the ITAR regulations, because they have extra legal things that they do. So it's open to foreign nationals. And I applied, or sorry, I got that interview. I talked to them, and that's how I ended up at Planet. And that experience at Sinclair really, really helped me when I was at Planet, because I was doing a similar thing both in manufacturing, and I was able to apply the things that I had learned at Sinclair on the reaction wheel level to this full satellite level that they were doing at Planet. So it was a really, really great experience to get here in Canada to then apply outside.
It's always great to hear that there's all these amazing opportunities that are open to Canadians and all other international students in one in the United States and also across the world as well. And I guess from your experience working with CubeSats, small sats, and learning more about satellites and getting to go to be an intern at a company that monitors and collects satellite data must have been like a very cool transition for you, going from something very small then going for like, I'm looking at like the big satellites currently orbiting Earth right now.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing once you got to Planet, you got to learn more about how space exploration actually is currently constantly monitoring and benefiting everyone on Earth. So is that one of the big things that you learned from Planet as an intern?
Yeah, I definitely was like it was really eye-opening to see how they were using this space technology to make life on Earth better. And that being their mission, was that these were a bunch of people who love Star Trek and Star Wars, and they love thinking about distant moons and different bodies in space. But they wanted to use this knowledge that they had in space and satellites to improve Earth first, and to like focus on that. And they thought about it so early on, like in the, right after the 2008 recession, and we're like, okay, like we gotta like do something. We gotta like, you know, focus on climate change. To do that so early on, when like only in more recent years have like it like really grown in the public, it was really great to see that they were using that technology at that time to do it. And yeah, I learned so much about different technologies that exist currently, as well as what Planet is currently doing to improve decisions people make based on using data from space. And I think that is so important. If you can't see change, how are you going to know you're doing anything different? And it's so great when I look at the news sometimes and I'm like, if something happens like an oil spill or there's, a forest fire, you could see images from planets showing you how the Earth has changed between those events. And that visibility is so eye-opening, because a big thing you hear from astronauts anytime you hear them is that the awe they feel when they look down and they see the Earth and how it's beautiful and how you can see different features of it and like understand like, oh, that's, this country, or oh, that's like this body of water. To be able to do that from the ground and just like look at these pictures, like I don't even know, like it's just so awe-inspiring. And like I know people at Planet who work on like that aspect of it, where they have to look at these images and kind of decipher what's going on. They say it's not even like a job, it's just a lot of fun to like look at these pictures of Earth, and like that's the best part, is like to know that you're doing a good thing and you're having fun while doing it, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sometimes don't realize that satellites in Earth observation, it's a part of space exploration, and it's constantly being able to monitor the Earth for natural hazards, change in urban development, monitoring agricultural growth. So I think it's something that really needs to be reminded. I think everything with the new climate change initiative, trying to make everyone aware that our Earth is changing and we are accelerating it, that these satellites are very helpful at visually showing us that on a yearly basis it's now changing, instead of maybe a decade-wise change, which is a lot more, which should be more of a longer change than a next year we're probably going to see a sudden change in the size of a forest, or this small little beach might be completely covered in water eventually.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that really should be highlighted a lot more. And it does sound like Planet, because I follow Planet on social media, and I think they do a very good job at showing all the types of data they get. And the fact that you got to work with a lot of these images personally, I think is actually really cool.
Yeah.
And I guess I just wanted to quickly add this extra question. If you were to meet someone who is also, someone wanted to start in engineering and has a huge interest in satellites and wanted to get where you were, what would you say is probably the biggest piece of advice that you'd give them?
I would definitely give them the advice to, get your hands on something. And I think like whether it is finding an already started project in your community, or it is, making your own project, I think like starting there and like feeding that interest and like learning about where within satellites you like, or even if it is satellites, maybe you like rockets more. So I think getting your hands on something and kind of like exploring exploring that aspect of it is really important. And in that in that vein, like you can reach out to the Cube Satellite team at the university near you. There's actually a high school student who emailed us at the Cube Satellite team and was like, hey, I really want to learn more about it. And like, I'm in high school, I don't know if I can really help, but like, is there anything I can do? And we were really excited because like, in space, like we're sometimes in silos and we're just like, oh wow, people know about us, like that's really cool. And so we encouraged her to kind of join our Slack and like come to meetings and just like learn. Like it wasn't costing us any time, other than just like checking up on her to make sure that she was understanding things. It was just like really nice to have an extra person just like listening in. And so you're going to find a lot of people like that in the space industry who are just like really excited to talk about what they do. So definitely reaching out to them and like finding out if someone like that you see is matching your interest is really a great way to do it. And then if something doesn't exist, there are many ways to make them exist. I started a events-based club, so it wasn't a technical group. And from there, you could pick the topics you talk about. You could be like, I want to learn more about satellites. Let's have someone from, this company who works on satellites come talk to us and like tell us more about it and answer our questions about what we can do and learn more. Or, you could start up a microgravity experiment and work with someone like Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, and you could create a payload that may eventually go on a satellite. Or you could do a high altitude balloon project, like a weather balloon. And there's so many different ways of getting to doing that, from a small scale balloon that you can make in your basement to working with companies or organizations like the Canadian Space Agency on their Stratos campaign. So there's so many different ways to do it, but definitely get your hands on something and feed that interest, and like do it over and over, like commit to it, do it like maybe once a week or something like that, that like consistently sustains that interest and build on it.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice, that a lot of the younger generation of our generation should be able to use to their advantage, because there's a lot more opportunities, I feel like, now than there were for us when we were probably in elementary school and high school, getting involved in more after school activity projects, especially space related ones. Now the CubeSats and small sats have really taken off at universities. A lot of high schools, I've noticed, are trying to either get involved, or if they can, start their own, which I think is a very good thing. It gets students more involved in understanding this is why we're sending these objects into space. We're not doing it just to say that, oh yeah, we could get this up there, but it's not going to do anything afterwards. But no, we are trying to show that, one, we can get it there. Two, it has payloads or instruments that can help us either in an outreach portion, just taking images, or something better like monitoring the temperature or gases that are in our atmosphere and seeing how they change. So I think getting them exposed early on is a very good piece of advice for them. And
definitely.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to move on to the question portion of my podcast. So I asked these to all the guests. So I wanted to quickly ask you, the first one is, if you could pick one celestial body for a future mission to go visit, which one would you pick?
So I feel like this is going to be like not the most interesting answer, because there is a mission going to it, but I just really like moons. I really like watery moons on orbiting planets, but I particularly really like Titan, maybe because I had a poster from JPL of Titan, which is really cool, and I was like, wow, Titan seems really, really awesome. And I know that there is a mission going to Titan, but I'm really excited about it, and I want to see what they find out. I know that there have been flybys. Cassini is like a one that's close to all of our hearts. So to have something go visit Titan after Cassini flew past it is really nice. But I'm interested to see what's going on there. Obviously, sci-fi is a big interest of mine, and I think when I was younger, someone was like, there could be life on these moons. So I don't know if there is. That'd be really nice if we could find out.
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with the mission going to Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon, it's called Dragonfly. And if you look at the drone, it's probably one of the coolest drones I've ever seen. Currently, for a planetary mission, it looks like a giant quadcopter. And they are literally going to send that to a moon far in our solar system. So I cannot wait for that to get launched in the future and see.
Are you excited about the Mars helicopter?
I'm excited to see if it works. Because I know that the whole it's like a technology demonstration. They just want to see if something could take off temporarily. Because I know it's not going any other science objective. It's going to take off, get launched somewhere, and land. But then that's it. But I think I'll be very interested to see, because since Mars's atmosphere is so thin, it's going to need a lot of thrust and propel to get it off the ground. So I'm excited to see if it works. But I think if I had to pick between the two, Dragonfly is still going to outshine it. That Marscopter may be the first like helicopter style drone to go on a planetary surface, but I think Dragonfly will beat it in every aspect, because it's supposed to keep on going. So the second question, since we did talk about how satellites are very important for monitoring Earth, so I wanted to ask you what your favorite spin-off technology is.
Because I love Canadarm, and I just really also just love that Canada put their name on it on the ISS. And just like, who doesn't love an arm that kind of moves in space? And I think this is a spin-off technology. is the neuro arm, which they use on Earth to do brain surgery, which was inspired from the Canadarm. And I think that's so cool that like our research into understanding how to make this very dexterous arm in space to do things like help build the ISS could then be scaled to, you know, do brain surgery and like, you know, help people here and like, you know, do things that can help surgeons operate on a very fragile part of our bodies. So I really, really like that one.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people don't realize that the medical industry has gotten
Mm.
a lot of benefits from space exploration. I know one at the top of my head I can remember is the alarm systems for the vital signs for patients. That alarm system was originally taken from the Apollo era when before might even before the Apollo era. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was to warn mission control when the astronauts' health vitals would suddenly change under extreme stress. So I think they adapted that to think, well, this is going to be useful for in hospitals. We need to know if a patient from across the ward is
Yeah.
suddenly got their heart rate up or is suddenly dying. We need to know this. So I think that's
Hmm.
seeing just that small little just one tiny alarm makes just a huge difference in the medical industry. And as you said, with the neuroarm for brain surgery, we need steady hands to help fix or just maintain one of the most powerful, complex organs in our body. And robots, I know people think like, oh, robots are going to take over the world, but they have the advantage that they can hold perfectly still to make incisions where human hands, you could be an expert, but I'm pretty sure there's still that one slight chance that you could be shaky for it.
For sure. Yeah.
So
And there's so many other cool medical advances that, like, just by having people on the ISS, we've learned so much about the human body. And, like, we will continue to learn more as we try to go further. And, like, yeah, I think that's like such a big thing that directly impacts our bodies and, like, our health. And yeah, it's just very cool.
I know it is very cool. And so the final question is: this is called the Diaries of Space Explorers, and so I wanted to ask to one space explorer, what is your favorite, or who is your favorite space explorer?
Right. I like that you said what because we got some great machines out there. I'm gonna cheat and give you two because now that I've, you know, been exposed to the American space, but I have some people that I really like there, but I also love Canada and I always want to stay true to it. So I'll give you a Canadian and an American. So my Canadian favorite space explorer is Dr. Roberta Bondar. Um, and I know that she's the first female astronaut, Canadian astronaut to go to space. But more than that, I was able to have the great opportunity to hear her speak in Woodstock, Ontario at her gallery opening there. And she had some wildlife photography. And I literally, the second I heard about it, I was like, I gotta go. Like, I have to drive the 2 hours from my house in Hamilton and see this woman speak about her photography. And just hearing her talk about how being outside of the Earth in the ISS gave her this greater appreciation for the world. um that perspective, like, it was so amazing to hear her talk about it because you just knew that she's seen things that we have never seen before, even through photos. Like, there was just something different about with your naked eye to see it. And yeah, just the appreciation she had for the earth and how she wanted to capture its beauty and like make people care about it was so important. And I just really love that, and hearing her talk about it and just how down to earth she is, even though she's like an astronaut, like one of the coolest people ever. Yeah, I just really love that about her. And yeah, she's really great. And my second favorite space explorer is Diana Trujillo. She is the mission she's a project manager for Mars Curiosity. She's currently working on Perseverance. And I had the honor to meet her through the Brooke Owens Fellowship. She is one of the leadership team, members of the leadership team. And she is so inspiring. Like, her journey to space is so crazy. Like, she came to America from Colombia with $300 in her pocket, and she worked as a maid and taught was learned English at Miami-Dade, and, you know, worked her butt off to get to JPL, and like all of the things she did to get there is just so inspiring, and to like meet her and speak with her and to like see how strong she is, like it is so great. Like especially like I've been a very shy lady, just like in the back, like doesn't really like to talk, like kind of like, knows things but doesn't talk about it. Like to meet Deanna and like just like hear her be like, why are you quiet? Like just speak. Like, just like hearing her encouragement, like I'm just like, she overcame so many things. Like I can do it too if like, she was able to do so much more. So yeah, I just really love her, and like just hearing her talk about perseverance and like how she's working on it. I'm like, oh my God, you're so cool. And like she feels like a kid when she's like looking at these things, and she's like, very much like she feels like all of us, like excited for perseverance. And I'm like, but dude, you get to work on it. Like, that's so cool. Yeah. I just really, yeah.
Well, I think you've got two very inspirational space explorer figures to look up to, and hopefully others will look up to them as well, especially having to, when you work your way up from not a lot to becoming the head project manager for a Mars rover mission. So if that's not an inspirational story, I don't know what is.
Right.
So Hira, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. It was really interesting to hear about your story and your passion for space exploration, and your opinion on satellites and how they constantly help monitor our Earth that we live on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to work with you at the Institute.
Yeah, excited to work with you at the Institute as well. So hopefully get to see you in person when COVID's calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Diaries of Space Explorers, where we have been speaking with Hira Nadeem. If you'd like to learn more about Hira's space journey, you can find her on Twitter at HiraInSpace. If you'd like to learn more about the show and follow to find out when new episodes will be released, you can find us on Twitter at Diaries of Space or on Instagram at the Diaries of Space Explorers. Thank you for listening, and see you guys next time.